Hey guys, Tominator here. So in this video, I wanted to address an issue I have with the current state of the IFBB, specifically with the men's bodybuilding open division, because as you may be aware if you've watched some of my other videos, I don't really follow the 212 class all that much less the physique or women's divisions or any of that side shit that's been tacked on over the years. So anyway, the major problem I have with professional bodybuilding these days isn't the lack of talent necessarily, and it's not the lack of competition either, although that is becoming increasingly concerning because now that Kai Green's out of the picture, we really don't have much of a rivalry going on at the Olympia anymore. Nobody's pushing Phil. And it's not even the fact that aesthetics have mostly died in the last couple of decades with the rise of all these bubble gut mass monsters. No, my biggest complaint lately is that the top guys barely compete anymore. And yes, this includes Kai Green, who we haven't seen in well over a year, but it's not just him. Look at the Arnold this year. It was a sad state. None of the top 6 from the Olympia even showed up. Louis Marco deemed it the weakest lineup in Arnold Classic history, and I think I gotta agree with him here. I mean, I'm happy for Cedric and all, and at least Dallas was there to provide some competition, but man, what a subpar show. I really don't understand these guys like Rolly Winkler and William Bonac, Sean Roden, Big Ramy. Like, where the hell were they all? This could have been an easy paycheck for any of them, even if they came in off. In a lineup this depleted, a second or third place finish at least was virtually guaranteed. Instead, they all elected to sit it out for some reason, making for a rather disappointing event. Now, maybe some of them had legit personal reasons for not attending, but surely not all 6 of them, right? So yeah, Cedric's posing and victory speech were outstanding, but other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot to get excited about this year. And then more recently, we had the New York Pro. So this is supposed to be the 3rd biggest competition of the year after the Arnold and the Olympia. But man, oh man, what a weak offering. No offense to the guys who competed in it, but the fact is none of them are even near the top 10, and to be perfectly honest with you, a couple of them I'd never even heard of before, and I still could not tell you some of these guys' names off the top of my head. That's how little I cared about it, really. When I saw the lineup, I didn't even bother watching, man. Like, there's not even one big name I could get excited about. So that's why I never made a video on it. Maybe I'll go back and do a review at some point, but as of right now, I really have no intention of doing so. Now, I may be a fan of bodybuilding and my channel's devoted to it, but at the same time, I'm also a fan of greatness. I don't care for second-rate shit, okay? It's like people who get all excited about the NCAA in basketball or the World Juniors in hockey. I just never really get into these tournaments because any player who's really any good will make it to the NBA or the NHL anyway, and I'll watch them then. So that's what it is. I mean, sorry if that sounds harsh or snobbish, but I'm just trying to speak the truth with you guys, you know? So it's the same thing here. If any of these guys at the New York Pro are any good, then we'll see them at the Olympia one day. Until then, they're not the cream of the crop, and I'm just not really that interested. Sorry, man. But that's not to say I only care about the Olympia. Quite the opposite, in fact. The Olympia is just the stage where guys prove themselves. It's the proving ground where they can make a name for themselves and ultimately cement their legacies. But at the end of the day, it's the bodybuilders themselves I'm really interested in, so it's really quite simple. I just want to see the top guys in the world competing regularly in more shows throughout the year, like they did back in the day. Is that really too much to ask? And to put it in perspective, consider the golden era of bodybuilding in the 90s. Now, lots of people would say the 70s or even the 80s was the golden era, but for my money, the 90s was the peak. In any case, this was a time when the top guys actually did compete more than once or twice a year. Take, for example, the Arnold Classic again. I mean, look at this top 3 in 1996. We have Kevin Levrone, Flex Wheeler, and Jurassic Paul Dillette, 3 Hall of Famers standing side by side. But not only that, look at the top 6. You add Sean Ray, Vince Taylor, and Andreas Munzer. I mean, overall, I'd say that's better quality than their equivalents at the 2016 Mr. Olympia, for God's sakes, and this is only the Arnold. Or how about the very next year, in 97, when you had Flex Wheeler back again, going up against one of the best mass monsters ever in Nasser Al-Somebody. So Nasser was pretty much that generation's Big Ramy. You could say nobody was fucking with the kind of freaky mass he was bringing, at least from the front, because we all know he could never compare to Dorian from the back, and we kind of see a similar dynamic playing out now between Phil and Ramy. But anyway, there was also Mike Francois. And those were your top 3, but that wasn't all, because we also had Vince Taylor, Kevin Levrone, and a very noteworthy version of Lee Priest in the mix as well. And I was actually going to show you a clip of Lee Priest speaking his opinions on this matter, about how guys barely compete anymore these days. And he's kind of a very similar opinion to me, so I just felt it wasn't really necessary to include it here, but I'll probably put a link to that video in the description or something, so if you're interested on hearing Lee's thoughts, you can go check that out. But anyway, back to the show. So when a Ronnie Coleman, who is finally starting to come into his own and who looks this remarkable, comes in fourth, you know the lineup is stacked, man. Not to mention the very formidable Freakenstein once again showing up and rounding out the top 6. So here's a list of the top 9 of that show, and just look at these names. Now, some people may disagree, but in my opinion, this is way better than what we see at the Olympia nowadays. But it wasn't just the Arnold. Even second-string shows boasted great lineups. Here we see Flex duking it out with Ronnie, and my God, I don't think I've ever seen Ronnie look that good in an ab and thigh before. Have you? This is from the 1996 Night of Champions, by the way. You can also note a young Gunter Schlierkamp in the background, along with Milos Sarcev there over on the right, and Mike Matarazzo and an older Gary Stridham also participated. And what's this? Dorian Yates in the 1996 German Grand Prix? You mean to tell me I'm reigning Mr. Olympia is actually competing in another show? Is this even legal? Somebody better call Phil Heath's agent. So here he is next to the other major mass monsters from the 90s and Nasser and Dillette, getting probably a beat from the front, I'd say, but then again, he smokes them both like cigars when they turn around, so that was always the deal and why he tended to dominate, as you all know. But Ronnie Coleman was also there, as was Kevin Levrone, Chris Cormier, Vince Taylor, Aaron Baker, and Jean-Pierre Fuchs. So just a ridiculously loaded lineup for a non-major show. And who could forget this contest with its epic lighting, the 1999 British Grand Prix, in which Ronnie Coleman battled and fended off very large and impressive versions of Flex Wheeler and the Maryland Muscle Machine. I mean, I think we could all wish that we had a top 3 like this at the Olympia nowadays, let alone a smaller show like the British Grand Prix. I'm not even sure some of these European Grand Prix shows still exist anymore, so if they do, that's a testament to how far they've fallen off the radar. So once again, let's jump back to the present day and compare all these great 90s lineups to what we see now, and it's just depressing, man. I mean, yeah, the depth and quality of talent we have now already pales in comparison, but it's certainly not helping when the top guys don't even show up anymore outside of the Olympia. Now, you could just argue that it was a bad year, and that's partly it, but this problem of the top pros not competing has been going on for years. As a fan, it's pretty sad, actually. It really makes it hard to get excited for this stuff when you know that the best guys aren't going to be there. I really don't see how this is good for anybody. It's not good for the IFBB or the bodybuilders because they're both losing out on money, at least in theory, right? It just doesn't make sense. And it especially sucks for us fans because we don't get to see our favorite bodybuilders do their thing. Can you imagine if other sports were like this? Like, what if the top tennis stars only entered one major a year? Say if Roger Federer decided he's only going to compete at Wimbledon now, or Rafael Nadal only did the French Open. How lame would that be? Or in the NBA, imagine if the 2 teams that made it to the finals automatically qualified for the playoffs the following year and could sit out all 82 regular season games. How stupid would that be? So this practice of not showing off your best athletes is not only crappy for us fans, it's just not smart business, man. So think about how much money the NBA would lose if LeBron James never played a regular season game because he got a bye to the playoffs. Well, this is pretty much exactly the situation we have in the IFBB, where the top 5 or 6 guys all immediately qualify for next year's Olympia. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if the upper echelon actually wanted to compete and was willing to do so at other shows, but when you have the Sean Rodens, Rolly Winklers, and Big Rammys of the world all electing to skip out the rest of the season, then that's just not good for the health of the sport you're trying to promote. Now, I get that bodybuilding is a different animal. It's a lot more taxing than most other sports, and it takes more time and preparation to gear up for a bodybuilding contest than it does for a basketball game or a tennis match. Granted, I get that, this is a fact. But taking an entire year off just to get ready for one show, that's some bullshit, man. It's totally unnecessary. I mean, we already have proof that it's not necessary by seeing how often these guys from the 90s were able to shape up and bring world-class physiques to the stage. I would argue it's actually better for most of these guys to compete more often, because not only does it ensure they stay in decent shape year-round and not get overly fat and bloated looking, and then have a higher risk of coming in off, it's also good practice for learning how to dial it in and get show ready, right? So I think guys like Big Rammy and Cedric McMillan in particular, who tend to always come in a little bit off, would really benefit from competing as much as possible and experimenting with different regimens and stuff to try and find the formula that works for them. So these dudes already have all the mass in the world. They don't need months and months of off-season bulking to get any bigger. They just need to find a way to come in really ripped while still maintaining their fullness, and boom, they're both instantly vying for a top 3 spot. And not only that, they stand to make more money from these shows too, at least in theory. Not just in terms of prize money, but also the endorsements that would come along with it. While it might not be as great as it once was for them in the pre-social media days when Ronnie and Jay were signing record-breaking contracts with MuscleTech and BSN, it's still got to be better than not competing at all, right? Right? I mean, one would hope so. If they can't make that work, if the prize money still isn't covering their supplement bills, then this industry is more hopeless than I thought. So, in my opinion, the solution to this problem is simple. The IFBB ought to make a rule where every pro bodybuilder must compete in at least, say, 3 shows a year. And if they fail to do so, then they're suspended, or you can fine them a hefty fee, or in any case, they shouldn't qualify for the Olympia. So even the champ, Phil, shouldn't be exempt from this. I mean, in some ways, it's a good thing that he doesn't participate in the Arnold, because then he'd suck all the suspense out of that too. But at the same time, we're talking about the best bodybuilder on the planet here. So you bet your ass I want to see him on stage more than once a year, damn it. And not in just some crappy off-season guest posing either. I'm talking shredded down and true contest form. I'm pretty sure every fan of bodybuilding can agree on that, right? So that's the deal, guys. I really don't get why these guys compete so rarely these days. None of them has a hope in knocking off Phil anyway, so what's the point in saving yourself for the Olympia when you have almost no chance of winning? I mean, pick your battles, man. You know, I can kind of understand from Phil's perspective, where he has very little to gain and a lot to potentially lose if he were to come in off and get upset at one of these other shows, because that would give the guy who beats him a ton of momentum coming into the Olympia, and Phil really doesn't need the extra cash, so it's not worth the risk to him. But like I was saying, if the IFBB would just get their shit together and force these guys to compete more frequently, this wouldn't even be an issue. So this is something, like I said, I really don't understand, to be quite honest with you. It makes zero sense to me from a business standpoint, and usually athletic organizations like this, making money is the bottom line to them. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, you know. They're trying to make a profit. So to not put a system of rules in place that guarantee a maximum return on your investment, well, that seems more than a little bush league and amateurish if you ask me. But maybe there's something going on here I'm missing. So if you have any insights to offer on this matter, that'd be much appreciated. Please let me know in the comments below. Enlighten me, guys, because like I said, I just don't get it. But what do you think about my idea to make it mandatory to compete in 3 shows a year? By the way, these shows would have to be spaced out over the course of the full calendar season to prevent guys from simply coasting from one show into the next, like what they currently do with the Mr. Olympia Europe and the Sherwood Classic and all that, because that's kind of cheating, right? But anyway, that's the finer details, but you get the gist. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. Until next time, homies, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.